Hello everyone, welcome to Fusion 360 for Glowforge users, part 0. I'm going to be your host, Jason Lichtman, and I'm excited to show you Fusion 360. I'm going to start by sharing my screen for just a moment here while I look that way, even though you're over there. Hold on. Excellent. Okay, so today is really part 4. But I'm calling it part 0 because we're going to be going back and starting with the basics. And the reason I'm going to be doing that is because I got a lot of feedback from Glowforge users that they love the content of what I gave so far, but they really wanted to focus on some of the basics. They thought I might have gone a little bit too far, too fast, and that's okay. So we're going to go back and start at the beginning and try to give a more basic approach to Fusion 360. Now, I have to admit that in doing so, that means that we're going to really be ignoring the fact that we're using this on a Glowforge eventually, and really just focus on the basics of Fusion 360, the basics of 3D CAD, and the basics of 2D sketching in a 3D CAD environment. And I hope that makes sense, and I'm excited to be your host today. So here's our agenda. Let's go to the actual agenda. One moment here. No, it's not working. So a little bit about your host so you know who you're talking to. Hold on, gotta get that working again. There we go. So my name is Jason Lichtman, and I happen to be wearing the same shirt today as in that picture. And my background is in mechanical engineering, and I spent about a decade working in industry as a consumer product design engineer. And I love designing things. It's something that I can't really turn off for myself. You know, if you were a dentist and you were to meet someone new, you'd probably look at their teeth and see if they did a good job brushing. In my case, I'd look at consumer products and I think to myself, how would that have been made? How was it designed? And how could it have been designed better? Like I said, it's just something I can't turn off. I love it. And so Fusion 360 is my tool of choice these days. And I'm happy to show it to you today. So let's go into it right away. We're going to open up Fusion 360, and if you don't already know, Fusion 360 is a hybrid cloud product that'll work on your PC as well as on your Mac, no problem at all, and it has the ability to work as a desktop client as well as on the cloud. And when I say in the cloud, I mean that it can use, for example, web services. It can be accessed via the web. So for example, if I open up, here I have a random browser of Google Chrome coming up. And if I go into what we call Fusion Team, I'd have access to all of the same projects that I could see in Fusion 360's desktop application. And so, for example, in this case, I have a laser cutting project, and these are all of my files that I could open from Fusion 360 itself. And I could come in here and look at these on the web, see different types of information about those projects, and then I could even come in here, view the file, and I can also edit the design. And I could even choose, do I want to edit that design in the desktop client or on the web? Now, if you are designing in the web, I should warn you that we are a little bit limited on what you can and cannot do. I would highly advise that you design in the desktop client, but for simple designs, you can do so on the web as well. Now, we are going to focus today on the desktop client, so I'm going to bring that up. And we are focusing today on sketching. Now, to some people, sketching is not the most interesting of topics. To me, I think it's the fundamental skill that you're going to need if you want to design anything in 3D. Now, I don't care if you're going to be designing in 3D for stacked laser cut products, or you're going to design in 3D for non-laser cut products. Either way, you are definitely going to want to focus your skills in sketching if you want to be successful. By the way, I'm going to tell you this really early on because we're at the start of our webinar. If you have any questions during the live session, please feel free to ask in the question and answer section of Zoom meeting. I would be happy to answer the questions as we go along and cater the rest of the demonstration or webinar to exactly what you're asking. So please, please, please ask away if you have any questions. All right, so back in here, we have a couple of different environments that I want you to be aware of. So first off, in our workspace area, we have modeling, and that's where you're going to be spending almost all of your time, right? This is for 3D solid modeling. If you don't know what that concept means, just consider it 3D modeling. Our patch environment is for 3D surface modeling. That's going to be a more advanced technique for kind of more organic shapes. Again, I think it's an advanced technique. We're not going to be focusing on that at all today. We do have the ability to design in sheet metal, and sheet metal does not have to be just for metal products. That could be for any kind of folded products, and that could include, for example, a leather purse that you're designing in 3D, and you want to be able to create a master pattern that you would laser cut in your Glowforge, and then be able to cut and sew together to be able to assemble into the final purse. That can be done here in sheet metal, and I am going to be focusing at least part of one of my upcoming webinars on the sheet metal functionality for like a leather purse. We do also have a rendering environment for you to be able to make what we call ray trace images of your product. And in layman's terms, that would be a photorealistic image of your product without having ever made a physical prototype of that product. And so think, for example, actually I'll bring one up so you guys can actually see it. This here is going to be a football helmet designed by one of my colleagues. And you're going to see here it's going to come up on our Chrome browser. Just a moment. You're going to see a photorealistic image, a rendering of this particular football helmet. You know, this is not an image of a physical object. This is an image of a 3D CAD file. And this can all be done here in Fusion. We are also going to be able to, going back to the workspaces, do animations, and that's for making video simulations of your products. Hold on a second. I have someone out there, I think it was Larry. Larry, if you have any questions, please ask away in the question and answer section. Excellent. So as I was saying, the animation section is going to be where you can make animations of your products. I'll give you a quick view of that right now, actually, so that makes more sense. So let's say for a moment I have this really cool deer head or bust of a deer, and we want to actually show what that's going to look like in an actual animation. Now, if you were working on a multi-component assembly, you could actually show how your parts come together or get taken apart and make basically assembly instructions out of that. As soon as Fusion finishes opening up this file, I'll be able to show you that. In addition to that, we have a simulation environment, which is where we do kind of a more engineering analysis on whether something is going to bend and break, for example. CAM is where you can make tool paths for CNC machining and also laser cutting. Now, I will admit this. When one of my first webinars, I did mention that I didn't think that the CAM environment was really great for creating our laser cut files. And I've since gone back and taken a second look. And I do think that it's worth taking a look again. And the reason is because you can actually put in your curve offset into the CAM environment and then create your design in the final shape that you want, and then have the curve automatically be adjusted for you. And again, we're going to take a look at that on another webinar. Today's going to be about sketching. We also have the ability to make drawings, and that would be 2D drawings for manufacturing. Now, I did mention that we had the animation environment, and so this is the kind of thing you could do in the animation environment. Let's say you wanted to start with a front view of your product, and then at 3 seconds in, you want to have an angle like so. And then at, let's say, 7 seconds, you want a view that looks like this. And then at 13 seconds, you want a really far out zoom like that. Now I'm going to hit the play button on my computer. I'm not going to touch my mouse whatsoever this whole time. This is just a quick example of the type of animation that you can create here in Fusion in the animation environment, and then save that out to a video format of your choice. All right, so I promise you that we're going to talk about sketching today, and I really do want to focus on that. And so the first thing you should know is that there are multiple ways to get into starting a sketch. The first way you can do that is saying, I want to create a sketch. And here's the icon for Create Sketch. I can click on the icon, and the next thing it's going to want to know is where do you want to create the sketch. Now, you do have to create a sketch on a flat surface. That can be a face of an existing part, or it could be a plane. And in this case, I see 3 planes. I see a right plane, a front plane, and a top plane. And I could choose any of these. Whatever you prefer is perfectly fine. So let's say I chose the front plane. Now it's going to give me a front view of that particular plane, and I can start my sketch. And as an example, I can draw a rectangle or whatever it is I'm going to draw. I'm going to exit out of this, and we're going to show you another couple of ways you can get into the sketch environment. The next one is I can actually pick the plane first. Now in this case, I have a folder here that shows me the original planes. Let me get rid of that rectangle. There we go. If I turn on this light bulb under the origin folder, I'm going to be able to see all 3 of those planes that I described, even before I hit that I wanted to create a sketch. I can see the right plane, the top plane, and the front plane. And hold on a second, I'm seeing from Larry that he's getting input from another mic, which is interfering with the presentation. I apologize, Larry. This is a working Autodesk office. We have over 140 employees, I believe, at this location. And so we do have some noise in the background. Perhaps on the next webinar, I'll, in advance, make sure that I pick a private room for us. So I'm going to just make sure to talk more loudly so that you can hear my voice over everything else. I was saying that you can create your sketch by choosing one of these planes first, right-clicking on that plane and saying Create Sketch. And in that case, again, it's going to reorient me, so I'm looking straight on to that particular view, and I can start my sketch itself. And again, you know, just as an example, I can go and choose my rectangle. Now, whenever you want to exit out of the sketch, I don't know if you saw that, I was just hitting the Stop Sketch button on the bottom right of my screen. The alternative is I could also hit Stop Sketch on the top right of my screen. And lastly, if I know what I'm going to be using the sketch for, I could actually just start doing that thing. So for example, if I wanted to make a box out of this particular rectangle and I'm going to use an extrude, I can simply go to extrude and then actually choose that shape. I don't have to exit out of the sketch first. Excellent. We also have the ability, let's see, so that would be, I would say those are the 2 ways that I would go into the sketch mode. Once you're in the sketch mode, I want you to know that all of the tools that you might need are going to be in this drop down here on the left. The sketch drop down. And the sketch drop down in combination, so all of these tools that are here on this drop down, as well as the items in the sketch palette, that would be everything that you might need to create a successful sketch. And so I have here all of the shapes that I'd want to start with. So let's say I wanted to start with a line. Here it is, I can choose line. If I want to start with a rectangle, I can choose rectangle. And within rectangle, I have 3 different options for how I want to draw the rectangle. Same thing with circle. In this case, I have 5 different options for how I want to choose a circle. I can do an arc, and I have 3 options. A polygon, and I have 3 options as well. And this polygon can have any number of faces you would like. And we'll go over that. In fact, actually, let's go over each of these one by one. So first is line. I click once, I move my mouse to anywhere I want, and then I click again. When I'm done, I hit enter on my keyboard, or, let's do that again, I can drag to this little checkbox and hit the checkbox, either or. Conversely though, if I'm drawing this and I get to the second point and I hit escape, escape also will work. The big difference though between escape and enter is this. If I draw a line, and I go to the next place and I hit escape, it completely finishes the line and exits out of the line tool. So if you wanted to create another line, you would again have to go to sketch, line, or hit L on your keyboard, that's the shortcut. And then I could say I want to start at the end point of the first and continue on. But this time, instead of hitting escape, I'm going to hit enter and same result. and same result. Also, what you could do, though, is if instead of hitting enter, you simply keep choosing new points, that'll actually make basically a polygon or any number of faces that you'd like. Let's do that again. I'm going to delete everything. I'm going to hit the letter L, which is my shortcut for line. And I'm going to click. And every time I click, it's going to make a new segment and it's going to always be attached to the previous. And so you'll see that right here. And when I finally close all of that together, that's when you're going to see it convert into this orange fill in the center of the shape. And that's what you're going to be able to use to make 3D objects. And so you might be asking yourself, so why can you make 3D objects out of this and you couldn't do the same thing when it was just a line by itself? And the reason is because the way Fusion interprets objects for being able to turn it into 3D is that it's looking for what we call closed profiles. And the closed profile is always going to be a closed loop of some kind. And it could be complicated, right? It doesn't have to just be a loop like this. It could also be, for example, a simple rectangle with maybe some more complex geometry to it. Perfect. And as I'm doing this, you're going to see that it's not going to show me that orange fill until the moment that I connect it to the end, and it is now a completely closed profile. This is an object now that I can take and click on. You'll see that the blue fill means that I clicked on it, and the black outline shows the same, and I can turn it into a 3D object of my choosing, like so. I'm going to cancel out of that. So going back to our line command, right? So the letter L on your keyboard is your shortcut for line. You can click on any point you want, and I want you to see that depending on where you're clicking, by the way, you're going to be able to impose what we call constraints to the line automatically. So for example, if I drag the line and it looks like it's approximately horizontal, you can see that there, and I'm going to point right now, you guys can't see where I'm pointing, but just in the middle of the line, in the center, there's that blue icon. It looks like 2 horizontal lines and 3 angular ones. That's the symbol that we have that represents horizontal. So when I click on for the second time here and then hit enter or exit to close out of that line, you're now seeing this icon again, showing you that this line is always going to be horizontal. If I click on an end of this line and drag it, it'll move, but it's always staying horizontal. If I drag the line itself, again, it'll move, but it's always staying horizontal. In fact, the only way that I'm going to be able to change the angle of this line is to click on this icon, which is the horizontal constraint, and hit delete on my keyboard. And now that that icon is gone, now I can come in here and actually change the angle of that line. And that's going to be super handy, and we'll go over some more information about that in just a little bit. So I'm going to click on this line and delete it. Let's go, the next tool here is rectangle. And we have 3 different rectangles. The first one is called a 2-point rectangle. And if I click once, and then I move my mouse and click again, it basically drew a rectangle from that corner to the other corner. And it'll do that any time that I'd like. And you can see that it actually shows me dimensions as I'm dragging so that I can have a feel for what the size is going to be of this rectangle. And if I want, I can even type in a value and then hit enter, and it'll be that value. Not only will it be that value, it would actually show you the dimension. Whereas in the first 2 instances, it didn't show you the dimension at all. You'd have to go and put those manually, like so. All right, let's delete all that and do that again. All right, we're going to go back and go under rectangle, 2-point rectangle. The keyboard shortcut, and you probably saw it, the keyboard shortcut right over here, the letter R, is telling me that all I have to do is click the letter R and I get to this tool. I click once. I'm not clicking and holding. I'm just clicking once, and then I move my mouse, click again, and it creates my rectangle. Now, I do see here that I have a bunch of constraints that were automatically applied. So that horizontal constraint was applied on the top and bottom, and I'm also seeing it on the vertical lines. And you might be wondering to yourself, how can you have a horizontal constraint on vertical lines? And the reason is because our horizontal constraint is really a horizontal / vertical constraint. It works for either. Perfectly vertical, perfectly horizontal, either or is fine. And if you ever want to apply that constraint, and I'm going to delete them right now, and when I delete them, you'll see, by the way, that I can come in here and now manipulate my rectangle, right? Because now it's not requiring any of the sides to be horizontal at all times or vertical at all times. But if I want to apply a constraint, like the horizontal one, I can click on the line, and then on the right-hand side, you can see here it says constraints. And anything below it is going to be a constraint that you can apply to the geometry that's on the screen. So in this case, this one right over here is horizontal/vertical, and it's going to snap to whatever is the closest to the current geometry. So in this case, I click it and it goes horizontal. I can click on this line and choose the same thing and it becomes vertical. Same thing over here and it becomes, well, that kind of went into a weird place. I'm going to undo that, and it's because right now that line happens to be near 45 degrees, and so it wasn't sure what to do with it. But if I drag the line so it's more vertical than it would have been horizontal, I can click on that line and choose horizontal/vertical, and now it's vertical. Again, same thing over here, horizontal, vertical, and now I'm back to where I started. Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and we're going to go and create a different kind of rectangle. This time, the center rectangle. We're going to skip the 3-point for a second. The center rectangle is the same as the 2-point, except when you click the first time, that first click is going to be the center of the rectangle that you draw. So I clicked once, and now I'm dragging out, and it doesn't matter if I drag really wide and not so tall, or really vertical and not so wide. Either way, this is going to create a rectangle that starts in the position that I clicked on in the first place and ends in the second click. And I could still take this thing and highlight it and move this anywhere I'd like. I can move it around and manipulate it and do all of those kind of things that I'd like. But the only difference is that in certain cases where you know that you wanted to draw a circle where the first click is the center, please use the center rectangle tool. All right, we have a third rectangle. The third rectangle is called the 3-point rectangle. This is a really good rectangle to use when the rectangle you're trying to draw is not perfectly vertical. Let's say you want to draw a rectangle that's on an angle. The 3-point rectangle is for you. So I click once, I move to another position, I click again. That basically defines what the angle is of the top or the bottom of the rectangle. And then I can drag either way, whatever I prefer, and it's going to set the other dimension. And if I just hit enter, it creates the rectangle. Oh, sorry, I have to click again. Click again, and it creates the rectangle without any problem. Now, I'm going to do that one more time for you guys so you see it again. Try it again. Sketch, rectangle, 3-point. So again, the first time I click, it's going to create one of the corners of the rectangle. The second time I click is going to create another corner. And then the third is going to create the, let's say, height of the rectangle itself. Now, you could also do this if you really wanted to for horizontal rectangles. You don't have to do this only for angles. So for that situation, a 3-point is I'm going to choose like this. And as I drag to the right, notice that because I'm approximately horizontal, that blue icon for horizontal showed up just below the horizontal line. I click again, and then now I'm creating the height of the rectangle. So 3 ways to draw a rectangle. There is no right, there is no wrong. There are just 3 rectangles. Now I am seeing a couple of additional constraints that I didn't see before, and so this would be a great time for me to introduce what they are. I'm seeing this symbol, and I see it on the top here, down below, on the left, and on the right. And what that symbol indicates is what's called parallel. And so right now, there's a constraint saying that no matter what I do with the top line, the bottom line is going to be horizontal to it as well. And the same thing is true with the left vertical line and the right vertical line. They are always going to be parallel to each other. So for example, if I were to get rid of the horizontal constraint at the top, and hold on a second, everyone, I'm going to make sure it's a little quieter here. Okay, thank you guys. So now that I got rid of the horizontal constraint, I can come in here and let's see, there we go. I'm going to take this thing and actually start to rotate it. And the key here is that because I have a parallel constraint here and here, these 2 lines are always going to be parallel to each other. I move one and the other is going to move as well, right? Same thing is true with the top and the bottom. If I ever want to get rid of that, all I have to do is click on the icon and delete it. And notice, by the way, and I'm going to undo that again, Notice that when I deleted this one, it deleted that one as well. It's because that constraint applied to both geometries. So you can see the symbol on both sides. Excellent. So this time I'm going to delete this parallel constraint. And now I can actually come in here and rotate this thing. And you'll see that now this line and this line are no longer parallel to each other. Right? If I ever want them to be parallel again, it's as simple as applying the parallel constraint again. So I come over here to parallel, click on it, and then I could choose two lines, any two lines that I'd like, and it's automatically going to apply the parallel constraint and show me the icon for each of those as well. Now that that's been applied, any change that I make to one is going to change the angle of the other as well.
Okay.
Excellent. Now we do have a third constraint that I see here, and I'm going to zoom in. Actually, zooming in isn't going to make the icon any bigger. The icon itself looks like the letter T, and that icon stands for a 90-degree angle, right? So what that means is that 90-degree angle or perpendicular, whichever terminology you prefer to use is perfectly fine. And so right now, this line and this line are 90 degrees to each other. That's kind of why we have that T-shaped icon. And they're going to remain 90 degrees to each other no matter what. So when I drag this corner and this line changes angle, this one's also going to change angle, and it's going to do so that no matter what I do, they're going to remain 90 degrees to each other. If I want to get rid of that one, all I have to do is click on that constraint, hit the delete key on my keyboard, and now I can come in here and I'm going to fix this just so that we have a good example here. Now I can come in here and bend my rectangle relative to that line. Technically speaking, I believe this is called a rhombus now. And that's what you're seeing on the screen. But if I ever want to put the perpendicular constraint on again, you come over here and you're going to find, I'm going to pick this line and this one. And I'm going to come over and choose perpendicular, and it's automatically going to become perpendicular and show me the icon. Cool. So we've so far gone over lines and rectangles in detail, as well as horizontal/vertical for a constraint, parallel for a constraint, and perpendicular. But we have a whole lot more to cover. Let's go under Sketch, and this time we're going to go under Circle. So the first one is called Center Diameter Circle. And what that's going to let me do is choose a first point for the center of my circle, and then when I drag out, move my mouse out and click again, that's going to create a circle of a certain size based on how far I moved my mouse. And it did show me, I'm going to do that again even, click once, move my mouse, and it shows me a dimension, and I can even type in a dimension and hit enter. And it's going to create that. Not only is it created to the right size, it's also going to add the dimension. Perfect. I'm going to delete that, and we'll do it a different way. We're going to go under Sketch, Circle, and this time we're going to do a 2-point circle. This one lets me pick 1 point, and then I can move my mouse anywhere I want, click again, and that's my circle. Let's do it one more time. Click once, move your mouse, click again, there's your circle. Let's go and delete that. Now, you have a bunch of different options. So 3-point circle, for example, lets you pick 3 points. And I did that too fast. Let me do that one more time. Circle, 3-point. I click once, click again, and now I can move my mouse, and it's actually going to create a circle that's still, as long as those first 2 points and where my mouse is right now are all in the same circle, that would be the resulting circle. Now, the results, like the final results, are always the same. It's just a circle. It's just a question of what's easiest for you to draw based on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Okay? And we do have other different circles available, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. We also have the ability to draw arcs. And arcs, by the way, are really just portions of circles. And to prove that out, there I have an arc. Now I'm going to draw a center point circle, and I'm going to drag it so it lines up. And now I have an arc that I can sort of highlight there. And then I have a circle that's on top of it, and you'll see that they're one and the same. In fact, if I delete the circle and leave the arc, I can actually take this point of the arc and drag it all the way around, and when I get it to connect with the other end, it's going to now be a circle, right? An arc is really just a portion of a circle. Now, I'll admit, I probably use arcs more than circles. I'd use arcs a lot. We'll go over that in just a bit. I just think that arcs are really handy. The other thing I do is I draw circles sometimes, and then I trim them until they become arcs. Either or would work fine. In fact, if I draw a line and I cross that circle, I can actually come in here and trim both of these, and so now I'm left with, you guessed it, an arc. Perfect. I'm going to delete that, and we're going to continue on. Even if you are, by the way, drawing an arc, there are 3 ways to draw an arc. The first is the 3-point arc. You pick 1 point, move to another point, pick again, and then when you move your mouse, now it's actually dragging out to create that arc. This is very similar to drawing the 3-point circle. Excellent. You can also say, I want to draw a center point arc, where you're picking a point, and then you're picking another point, and the first point is going to represent the center of the arc itself. The second is one of the endpoints, and then you drag around to create the third. Now, I don't want to go over that in too much detail, but I want you to practice trying each of the different ways you can make each of the shapes. Again, the result is the same, it's just a question of how you get there. And by the way, if you're in any of those tools that have multiple options, like circle, for example, on the right-hand side, you can actually, even though I chose maybe center point circle, I can switch to one of the other kinds of circles right over here. I don't have to exit out of it and go back to the sketch tool, find circle, and pick another. I can pick any of the circle tools and then choose another from right over here on the right-hand side. Excellent. We also have the ability to make polygons. So here I'm going to go and create a polygon. And when I drag this out, I have the ability to come over here, choose a number. So maybe I want 10 sides to my polygon. Maybe I want 100 sides to my polygon, which will, the higher the number of faces, the more it's going to look like a circle, by the way. And I could even do, something like 13 sides or even 3 sides, and you're going to end up with a triangle. Excellent. There we are. I'm going to delete that and do that again. I'm going to go under Sketch, Polygon, and I could choose circumscribed polygon or inscribed. Basically, it's telling you whether or not there's a circle that goes around the outside of the polygon or the circle that goes around the inside of the polygon. Either one is fine. It's whatever your preference. Let's say I'm going to draw a bolt. I would probably want a 6-sided head for the bolt. And so I come over here. It's already set to 6, and I click, and there we are. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a throwback to constraints that we talked about earlier. You can choose any of the lines here, like let's say this bottom line. And if I want this thing to always be horizontal, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to apply a constraint to it, and that constraint is going to be a horizontal constraint. And I want you to think of, if you don't like the word constraint, if for whatever reason it doesn't really mesh for you, I want you to think of constraints like rules. So in this case, I'm going to apply a rule and say, from now on, this line must be horizontal, right? And I'm going to choose that rule, and now that line is always going to be horizontal, or at least until I decide to break that rule or delete that constraint. Hope that makes sense. Excellent. So I can come in here, and I can also, I can place this however I like. I'm going to go and delete that, and we're going to go on to something else. I can go under Ellipse, and Ellipse is basically an oval. So I can click once, and what it's doing is it's coming out with this dotted line, and then I'm going to click again, and now when I drag, it's going to show me an oval. And you can see here I could do a really wide and skinny oval, and that oval doesn't have to be perfectly horizontal. Now it can be if I wanted to. So I'm going to delete this whole thing, and we're going to do it again. Sketch, Ellipse, and this time when I click, after I click the first time, I can click approximately horizontal or approximately vertical to the original position, and you can see that blue icon that showed up next to the line and just below my cursor, again saying that it's automatically going to apply a constraint, in this case the vertical constraint. And so now I have a vertical ellipse or a vertical oval, whatever you prefer. Excellent. I'm going to delete that. We're going to go and we could also do, by the way, slots. And slots are going to be exactly what you would expect. I click once, I click again. This time, notice again, I'm doing horizontal, and it's automatically, I'm drawing a drag rather horizontally, and it's automatically applying a horizontal constraint to this line. I click here, and then now when I drag, it's creating a slot. And this is awesome because what I used to have to do if I wanted to draw the same slot is I used to draw a rectangle like this. Then I would come in and draw an arc from that corner to that corner, like so, and from this corner to this corner, like so. And then I would say I want the arc and the line to be tangent, and this line and that arc to be tangent, and then I would delete the vertical lines, and now I have my slot. Way easier to just use the slot tool. I come in again, I choose slot, and we have a bunch of different options on how you could draw it. Click once, drag, click again, drag again, and click a third time, and now I have my slot. Now the only one I want to show you in particular here is the arc slot. And you can come in here and say slot, a 3-point arc slot, zoom out, click once, click again, drag. So now I have my arc. This is very similar to the 3-point arc that we had before. This time when I click again, I can now drag and create the width of my slot. And there we have it. Pretty handy. These are all different ways you can make slots. Excellent. Now we're going to go under Sketch, and we're going to see Spline. Now I'm going to warn you here. Splines are awesome, and they are also difficult to tame. So I could do an entire lesson on splines alone because they are challenging. If you want to create complex geometry, splines are definitely the way to go. In fact, if you wanted to 3D model something like this computer mouse, I would say that you're not going to really be able to do so with just arcs and straight lines or polygons or anything else. It really is going to be a spline that is going to create that kind of shape. I'll give you a quick demo on this. I'm not going to do a deep dive into splines because, like I said, splines alone can be its own lesson. When I draw a spline, I click once, I click again, and if I hit enter, it's going to exit out and it's going to look like I have a straight line. And for all intents and purposes, right now I have a straight line. The difference is these green handles that are on the ends, both at the beginning of my spline and on the end. The cool thing here is that I can click on any one of these points on the handles, and I can actually drag this around. And when I drag this around, I can change two things at once. One is what we call the amplitude or the magnitude of the handle, and the second is the direction or the angle of the handle. And you can see here that as I drag in relatively the same angle, the arc starts to change quite a bit. The more that I change the magnitude or amplitude, the more that I'm changing the influence of this handle to the shape of the arc. And again, this is getting a little bit more advanced, and I'm going to try to pull back a little bit, but you can create some pretty incredible geometry with splines. You can also come to the other end and do the same thing with this handle. You could even do it in the opposite direction, and you end up with a pretty curvy shape like this. You can even make multiple control points in the middle. That's what we call the points in the middle. So if I say sketch spline, I can choose a point like this, a point like this, a point like that, and then another one over here. And when I hit enter, now I have an even more complex shape. And where it gets really crazy is now I can come in here and change any one of these handles, both the amplitude or magnitude of the handle and the direction. And what that means is that I can actually get a really crazy shape as a result of this, but it also means that it can be really difficult to control this. As you can already see, just from messing with it the way that I have, I've created intentionally here a really weird kink in my spline shape, and that might not be ideal for my product development. So what I would encourage you to do, and this is all I'm going to say on the matter, I don't want to go too deep, is the absolute maximum that I recommend that you, maximum number of control points that I recommend in your splines would be a beginning point, click once, middle point, click second time, and third point, click the third time. And at most, mess with all three sets of these handles. There you have it. You can add 100 control points, 500 control points if you want, but the result is going to be pretty complex and really hard to tame to get the results that you want. So this is the most that I'd recommend. Again, it's a beginning point, middle point somewhere, and then an end point, each one having its own handles that you can drag and manipulate. And again, remember that you can, in this case, you can control the position of the end point, you can control the amplitude of the handle, and you could choose the angle of the handle. So that was 3 things that I can control right here, 3 things that I can control in the middle, and 3 things that I can control in the end. That's 9 things in total, and that's plenty. I don't think you should go any more than that. Excellent. Any questions so far? We have a big live audience. I don't see a lot of questions coming up. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer them. Excellent. All right, so continuing on, let's see here. I'm going to delete the spline. I'm going to go into, I don't really use conic curve, but basically you can create here a conic curve. If I were going to do a conic curve like this, realistically, I'd probably do a spline. So I don't use conic curve very much, but you do have that ability here in the sketch palette. Then we also have point, and we have text. Point I use a lot. It literally just puts a point anywhere that I want. Realistically, I don't put them in space like I just did. What I would realistically do is, like, for example, if I'm drawing a circle and I wanted to draw some sort of line that goes across it, and I want this intersection to always be perfectly vertical above this center of the circle, what I would do is I would say sketch, point, pick the point onto the line, and exit out. Then I could choose the point itself and the circle and say I want them to be coincident with one another. Now what that really did was applied 2 different coincident constraints. I'm going to undo this so you can see it all again. When I put the point in, I could have put the point anywhere. But when I clicked on the line, it by default created a coincident constraint saying that point is always going to be on that line. So watch this. Click once on the line. Now, even if this line can't move, like now, I can drag this point and it'll move anywhere on the line that I'd like. It's coincident to the line. Then I applied the second constraint. I clicked on the point, clicked on the circle, and said coincident. And now there's only one solution for coincident to the line and coincident to the circle. And that would be the intersection between the 2. Perfect. So now I could say I want to take that point and I want to take the center of the circle. And just like before when I took a line and I said I made that line horizontal or that line vertical, I could even do the same with 2 different points. So now I have a point in the center of a circle, which is in itself a point. And I could say I want to make that horizontal/vertical. And it snapped into place right away. It applied the rule. Like, you know, from now on, the intersection of the line and the circle shall be vertical from the center of the circle. I can still manipulate the circle itself, and I could even manipulate the line, but it's always going to follow that rule. The intersection between the 2 is always going to be vertical relative to the center of the circle. And if I ever wanted to delete that constraint, you guys should already know this by now. You've been listening to me for the last 45 minutes saying the same thing. I can come in here and choose this icon and delete it, and now the intersection can actually move around. All right, and let's leave that there. I'm going to hit undo. Perfect. So the cool thing that I hope you're being able to see already is that you can take different base geometry, and by applying constraints, you can actually force the geometry to do some pretty cool stuff. So for example, let's get rid of this line and that intersection. Let's move this circle to be on that pink dot. Perfect. And let's say, actually no, let's draw another line. I'm going to draw a random line, just like so. And then I'm going to say that I want this circle and this line, and I highlight both by holding Control as I click each. I want them to be tangent. And you can see this icon here. Tangent is a circle and a line right next to each other. And when I apply that, now this line is always going to be tangent to the circle. So let's watch that in action. I'm going to take the end of this line, and as I drag it, no matter what I do, it's always going to follow the Whoa, that did a little something weird there. It's always going to follow the circle itself. Excellent. Now, if I wanted this dot to also always be on the circle, then we're going to apply a different constraint, the one that we've already talked about, coincident. I'm going to take this white dot, click and hold Control, click on the circle, and I could say coincident, and the end of the line snapped automatically to be on the circle, which basically means that the end of this line is the circle. Perfect. Now there is another way I can do that. I'm going to hit undo so that the line comes back, and that's called trim. So under Sketch, Trim, I can click on a sketch segment, and what it's going to do now is it's going to look for other sketch segments that intersect with whatever I'm hovering over, and highlight in red what it's going to trim. So in this particular case, if I click, and I just did, it's going to trim anything on that line that extends past whatever would intersect with it, which in this case is the circle. So let's do that more practically. Let's get rid of all this. I'm going to draw a bunch of random lines. There we are. If I wanted to trim this, all I have to do is go to the Trim command, and I could do that under Sketch, Trim, or I can hit the letter T on my keyboard, that's short for trim, and I can select any of these segments that I want to get rid of and get rid of them individually. Conversely, if I wanted to extend a particular shape, I can do that as well. So that's under Sketch, Extend, and when I hover over a line, it's going to preview in red where it thinks that it might want to extend to. And depending on what I hover over, it's going to give me a different preview. So right now, for example, you might ask yourself, well, why is it extending to the end of the red? Like, where did that even come from? And I can't show you this right now easily because if I move my mouse, the red's going to go away. But this line over here, this bottom one, there, if you were to extend that one out to the far left, it would actually intersect with the end of this red thing. So it's trying to figure out mathematically where would be the next place to extend. So there we go. And if I did that again, now it honestly has no idea where to go, and it would just go pretty far out. I come over here, and it says it probably wants to attach. And you can see it's going to do that for any number of segments that I'd like. So how is this practical? Well, for example, let's go into a real part. So I have here this closet divider that I think I showed in webinar number 1. Nope, might have been webinar number 1. Let's go with that. And I'm going to go into this sketch. And here I have a sketch, and it has a bunch of dimensions. And granted, you know, we didn't talk too much about dimensions, so for now I'm just going to get rid of half of this. All the dimensions, we don't really care about them. We just want to see the geometry. Excellent. So let's say, and let's get rid of that profile. There we go. So this is the basic shape of my closet divider. And let's say for some reason that I wanted to get rid of this notch. I don't want it there anymore. So I'm going to go and click on this line and hit delete. Click on this line and hit delete. And what I can do is I can go under Sketch, Extend, and when I highlight over there, it extended the circle and actually connected itself. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here, and it connected itself. And now I have a closed profile again that I can use for any number of things. Conversely, let's say I started off with this shape, and now I want to actually put the split in there that wasn't there before. I can come in here, and even though I could draw lines that are exactly where I want to start. Let's see, I want to draw a line from exactly here to exactly here. And I want to draw another line from exactly here to exactly there. And then I could apply constraints and do all different kinds of stuff like that, like parallel constraint. And then I can come in here and trim. And I'm doing this, I did this a little fast, but I said Sketch, Trim, and I picked this geometry and that one. And now it's gone. So this is a really great practical example of being able to extend and trim to your heart's content. Excellent. Let's exit out of it. All right, cool. So let's see if there's anything else here that's of serious value. Excellent. So let's say right now I have this line here is a single line, and I wanted to split it up into 2 separate lines, and I wanted to split it at this point right there. What we do is we call that break. And so I'm going to go under Break. And you can see, by the way, and I hope you notice that anytime you hover over any of these tools, it actually shows you a little tool tip on what it's doing and how it's doing it so that you can have a better idea of what's happening or what's likely to happen. I'm going to choose Break, and I'm going to hover over this line, and you can see that red X exactly where I wanted it because it sees that this line over here crosses it at that red X, and so that's probably where I'd want to break it. And now that I've done that, I now have a separate line for that area and this area. Perfect. So far we've covered almost all the tools over here. We didn't cover text. I don't think, honestly, that the text commands in Fusion are ideal yet, but you do have the ability to draw text pretty easily. So I click on text, and I'm going to type in Glowforge. I can choose the height of the text, like how big it's going to be, basically. And then I could also choose an angle for how I want to actually put this. And in this case, let's make this super big. I'm going to go under maybe 50 millimeters and say OK. And I have no idea where that showed up. My gut tells me that the scale that we're on right now is really small. So let's try that again. Sketch, text. I'm going to pick right over here. And I'm going to type in Glowforge. And we're going to say OK. And I have a trick for us. If right now I might be too zoomed in and I might be too zoomed out, I really don't know. But I can go down below and say zoom, or I could say fit. And if I say fit, it's automatically going to scale us in or out so you could see everything that you created to the size of your screen. So for example, and this is some text, and let's get rid of the text. We'll bring it back when we're ready. I draw a rectangle that's whatever this size is. Oh, let me try it again. There we are. And I'm going to zoom in really, really far. I can't see the rectangle at this point, and I could be zooming in or out for quite a while until I get to the right size. I could just say fit and zoom window. Oh, sorry, I did that wrong. We're going to try it again. We want fit, and it's automatically going to scale us out to the right size. That's perfect. Cool. So that's a super handy tip. Also, by the way, if you're using a mouse with a middle mouse button, and I highly recommend that you do, if it's any kind of 3D modeling, that is definitely the way to go. I don't recommend trackpad, that's for sure. I also don't recommend the little tiny button that you might find in the middle of your keyboard if you're on a laptop. That is not going to be ideal either. A proper 2-button mouse with a third button in the middle is going to be ideal. All right. This one happens to be in Logitech M525. I love this mouse. Can't say enough about it. I actually always keep a spare because you never know when it's going to die on you and you need to model something. But I really do love this mouse. All right, so let's continue. We have under Sketch Tool. So we went over Trim, Extend, and Break so far. We didn't go over Fillet. So fillet is our fancy engineering or design term for a broken edge or a rounded edge. So right now I have a rectangle, and if I were to make this into 3D, it would be very sharp edged. But we want to make it rounded. So I can come in here and choose a corner, and in red it's going to preview what we're going to get. And then once I click, I can actually come over here, and using this arrow, I can drag it wherever I'd like to preview the size of the fillet. Or I could type in a value like 100 millimeters, and it's going to be exactly that. I could also do the same thing by hitting the letter F. Oh, sorry. No, that's incorrect. The letter F on your keyboard is a shortcut for a 3D fillet. If you're doing a 2D fillet, like in sketch mode, you do have to come over to the sketch palette and choose fillet. But we do have a third option for it. If you're using certain tools over and over again and you'd like to have easy access to it, then I'd probably want to take an icon for that thing and put it up in my menu. So right here I have the fillet icon up top. And I'm going to show you how to get rid of it and put it back in. If I click on the icon and drag, click and hold and drag off, it's going to get rid of the icons. And I could do that for all of these icons if I really like. And then I can come in here under Sketch and choose anything that I'd like. And when I move to the right end of it, I could choose Add to Toolbar. So I'm going to do that with fillet. I love using it for fillet, for trim. I use a lot of circles, so I'd probably put it for circle as well, and even offset. If you want to be even like more of a pro user, I would say that we have keyboard shortcuts for a lot of our commands, but we don't have keyboard shortcuts for everything. So I would probably reserve the space up top for items that do not have keyboard shortcuts. So for example, I believe I put trim up top in this case, and I get rid of trim because the letter T would take me to trim immediately. The circle as well, that would be the letter C, and so I wouldn't bother with that. But fillet is one that doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, so I definitely have that up top. L I get rid of, offset I get rid of. I would most likely put in, extend would be a great one to put there because there's no keyboard shortcut. Anything else, you know, it's whatever you prefer. So let's say I go to fillet, and instead of choosing the corner, I can actually choose the first line and then the second line, and it by default knows what corner you want and is going to do the same thing like before. Again, I can drag this wherever I'd like. And I could also type in a value like 75 and hit enter. If I draw multiple fillets, so now I have two fillets, this one's 100 and this one's 75. I want to make them both the same. They're always going to be equal to each other. What am I doing? I'm putting a rule. I'm saying from now on, those fillets are going to be equal. So to do that, I'm going to delete this dimension. I'm going to choose the second fillet, hold Control, select the first fillet, and then over here on my constraints, there's one here called equal. And from now on, if I change the value of the dimension on the first, it's going to change the value for both. Excellent. So again, this is a great example of constraints being really helpful. Now we went through most of this toolbar. Sketch scale is literally to take the entire sketch and to be able to scale it based on a particular point. And so that's super handy. Also though, I would say more handy than that is you have the ability to mirror. So in this case, let's say I draw a line, and you could have a line already, you know, it doesn't have to be one that you draw just for this. I could highlight this entire shape and say sketch, mirror, and I'm going to choose the mirror line to be this line right here, and it's automatically going to create a mirrored version of the first. But if I modify the first one, it's going to modify the second as well. You know, this is something that for a Glowforge user, something that you can't really do very well in Illustrator. You can definitely mirror across the center line, but once you've done it, it's done. You cannot go and mess with the first component or segment and have it update the second as well. And that's what I think is really great about what we call a parametric CAD environment like Fusion 360. Cool, so that's how mirror works. And let's get rid of all this and keep going. We're going to say sketch, and we also have the ability to make a pattern. So for example, if I have on my origin, I have a circle, and now I'm going to draw another circle inside it. I'm going to say I want the second circle and the middle to be vertical, right? This thing can only move up and down now. And I want to make a pattern of it. Actually, let's make it more complicated so that it's more visually appealing. We're going to go like this. We're going to take this line and set it to be coincident. We're going to use the trim tool that we showed earlier. And now I have a hemicircle. Yeah. And so now I could highlight that. And I could say I want to sketch, circular pattern. And I'm going to be able to pick the center point. That's this center right here. And I could choose however many of these that I would like within the circle. And I can actually get that. That's awesome. So think of, in your case, if maybe you're designing a gear, or you're designing a snowflake, or something else that's repeating around a center point, you can draw it once and then have a circular symmetry. Excellent. Now, I also want to show you, actually, you know what, I would say that's the majority of the sketch tools in this drop-down. We do also have rectangular patterns, so if you actually wanted, let's say, this shape to go to the right, however many of those you want, you can actually come in here and say, I want to have 10 of these or 20 of these. So another way to look at that, and let's actually get out of this thing, we'll do it again. Let's say for a moment here that you drew some sort of really cool shape. and for now I'm going to use a rectangle, and you want to be able to put lots of these in the Glowforge, you can actually take this thing and under Sketch, say I want to do a rectangular pattern, and drag this out, and you could have as many as are going to fit in, let's see here, in a certain distance. So we could set this as, let's say, 19.5 inches, which is the width of the Glowforge. It looks like my rectangles are way too big for this, so I'm going to pretend like we have more space. Cool. And I could say that I want to have 3 of these, or 5 of these, or 10 of these in a certain amount of space. Cool. And I can, by the way, do the same thing not only in one direction, I could also do it in another direction as well. And we could say, for example, there we are. Excellent. And so you could actually turn this into, let's say you designed a cupcake pattern. You could make this into an entire cookie sheet. Or, you know, in the laser cutter, however many of these you could fit in your Glowforge. Perfect. All right. So we went over almost all, I believe, of the sketch tools that are in this dropdown. What we haven't gone over are all the constraints. So we went over coincident, we went over parallel, perpendicular, horizontal, tangent. We also went over equal. The ones we did not go over, and this is going to be the last stuff we're going to go over. We're going to run a little bit late to make sure that we covered everything, and then we'll be done. We're going to still cover collinear, concentric, midpoint, fixed, curvature, and symmetry. All right, so let's go over each of those one by one. Collinear. Let's say I have a line and an arc. Go. And then I draw another arc this way. There we are. Let's say I want these to line up so that this line and this line are straight relative to each other. The fancy word we use for that is collinear. And so I'm going to choose each of these lines. I hold Control in between picking them, and I choose collinear, and they're automatically going to snap to be collinear to each other. Now, the order of which one of those you pick first is going to determine which one is going to move to the other. And I didn't pay too much attention to what I did there, so let's try it 2 different ways. I'm going to pick this top one first and then this one second and say collinear. And it looks like the second one moved to the first. Let's confirm that that was accurate. This time I'm going to pick this bottom one and I'm going to choose the top second and choose collinear, and exactly what I thought was happening. So the first one you choose is going to be the more static line. The second one you choose is going to move towards the first. Cool. In terms of concentric, so here I have 2 arcs. So let's go back a step. Forward. There we are. I have 2 arcs or 2 hemispheres, and let's say right now these 2, they might be 2 totally different diameters, but right now the center of those 2 circles are in totally different places. I can make them, however, be concentric. That's the term we use for 2 circles that are concentric, one relative to the other. So I pick this one here and pick the second, again holding Control in between. I hit concentric, and it's automatically going to snap to be concentric. Now, you might not think it did that, right? Because if you look at it, the arc, the second one, the lower one, still looks like it's pretty far away from the first. And I would implore you to recognize that we didn't say that they're equal in diameter. All we said is that the center of each arc is the same, and that is true. The white dot that represents the center of each is now the same white dot. In fact, if I take this arc and I try to make this bigger, hold on, I did some weird, there we go, and I try to make it bigger, you're going to see that this circle is about the same distance in relative to the outside, excuse me, of the bigger circle. And that's because they are concentric, one relative to the other. A more concrete example is this. I take this circle, and let's put some dimensions on here. This thing is going to be 50. This one is going to be 25, and they look really tiny in space, but it's okay. I'm going to pick them, and let's see. Whoa, these are like really tiny. Let's delete this whole thing and start again. We're going to zoom in quite a bit. There we go. We're going to pick a circle. This one's going to be 5 millimeters. We're going to draw another circle. This one's going to be, I'll call it 10 millimeters. And now I'm going to pick this circle and this one and say concentric, and they snap to each other, that they will always be concentric. Now they move together relative to each other. I could still change the dimension, but they will always be with the same center. And the same is true whether it's going to be an arc or a circle. Excellent. We also said that we were going to go over, hold on here. Julie was asking, when a spline gets saved, does it come up as segments? You probably asked this quite a while ago, so I apologize I didn't get to it earlier. A spline is always going to be saved and be a spline. It does not come up as segments. That being said, we do have an option in our settings to be able to save arcs as what we call polys, and let's take a look at that real quick. If you go under Preferences, I believe under Design, hold on just a moment, we have to find it. No. Where was it? I'm not seeing that right now, but it is in here in the options. Where it'll actually segment things out, because some laser cutters and other CNC machines can't interpret splines very well, and so you do have the ability to export as kind of more segmented if you'd like, but the default is definitely going to be a spline stays as a spline. And if you brought that into Illustrator or anything else, it would come in exactly how you'd expect. Excellent. All right, so we went over coincident, collinear, concentric, midpoint. All right, so let's say for a second I have a line, and I have here, this is the origin of my part. I can come in here and say I want to put a midpoint constraint on this dot and this line, and it automatically makes it so that the center of this line, the midpoint of this line, is going to be locked into the origin in this case. And that's super handy because that means that you, by default, have symmetry in this particular case. Let's give you a more realistic example. So I draw a circle. I have a line coming right through it, and then I trim this up, let's say. And now I want to draw another line, and I want this one to go to the center over there. I can come in here and say midpoint, this point, and this line, and it's automatically now in the center, right? And now it did tweak the geometry a little bit, and that's because I didn't apply enough other constraints to lock down the shape or positioning of that particular sketch, which is why I was able to move on this. Cool. What else did we not cover? Horizontal, vertical, tangent, curvature. Okay, so when we showed splines earlier, we were talking about how splines are super curvy, right? I showed a spline like this, and we can make it nice and curvy. There are ratings for how curvy things are. And so if I draw, let's say I draw this corner, I think we could all acknowledge that that's a pretty sharp corner, right? If I draw something like this, even though it's not as drastic, this is still a really sharp corner, believe it or not. If I were to look at how light bounces off of that corner, it would bounce off in a way that makes it very clear that that's a sharp corner. If I go and I take this original one and I added a fillet, most people would agree that that's now a rounded corner. But then people in the product design industry would say that that's not really, that's not curvature continuous. And curvature continuous is really like it's a very high level of requirement on how smooth something is. And so let's actually take this and turn it into a real thing, and I think that'll make more sense. So I'm going to come in here and make a rectangle, and I'm going to turn that into a box. Perfect. So now I have a box, and I'm going to turn on what we call zebra stripes. And you guys probably don't use this yet. This is kind of an advanced tool. And what this is intending to show is how light bounces off of different faces of an object. And if I actually make you a sphere, I think that you're going to see this a little bit more clear as well. So let's make a sphere also. Perfect. And we're going to put on the zebra stripes on the sphere. Perfect. So you can see here that light is going to, the lines that you see here that are on the sphere are nice and uniform. The lines that are coming off of the different faces of this rectangle or box are coming out way crazier, and it's because the light is bouncing off of the top face very differently from the front or the side, whereas the sphere has like a nice round, it's a perfect sphere, so it's the results are very different. If I then come in here and apply a fillet, sorry, it's under Modify, Fillet, and I apply the fillet to these edges here, what you're going to see is that the light actually bounces off of this fillet different than it does on the front face and different on the top face. And that's because even though to you or I this would be a pretty smooth object, you know, for all intents and purposes this is a smooth object, especially if I turn off these lines that you normally see here. Where is that thing? Visual style, shaded. There we go. If I turn that off, this is probably what the object would look like in real life, but you can still see that there's a little bit of a shading difference between the flat and the fillet. And if you're trying to get into like really high-end product design and development, then those edges are that much more important, and you want like a really nice smooth surface. And so what we do is what we call curvature continuity. And curvature continuous surfaces have a much higher level of smoothness, and splines are definitely one way to do that. And if you look at how we draw the splines, you'd actually see that that's how we can control how the light pools in different areas on the surface or doesn't pool in different areas of the surface. And so let's go and create a shape using splines, and then it'll make a lot more sense. And then I'm going to bring this all back so it actually makes sense. Okay, so we're going to come into the YZ plane and we're going to create a sketch. And I'm going to create something with a spline. Perfect. Drag it like that, maybe something like this. Cool. And then I'm going to turn that into a 3D shape. Perfect. And now, so what you have is as you go from around the surface of this particular part, you're always keeping curvature continuity. And so now if I come in here and I apply, let's say, the zebra stripes, put on the originals, I'll put on another one, so this face right here, the light itself, you can see how the zebra stripes actually flow around the part. And it's definitely an abrupt change from this face to the rest of the part. Within the part itself, you're still getting changes, right? The surface is definitely changing as it's going around, but you're not going to get nearly as abrupt of a change as you are going to get from this one to that one. It's much smoother. The same thing is true also, actually no, I'm going to change directions entirely. So now that we go back into a sketch, let's go and create another sketch. I want you to see what the curvature tool actually does. So if I take this line and this arc, I can apply tangent, and the result is going to be a fillet, just like you saw over here. All right, you can see that's the icon for fillet right there. I'm going to go ahead and draw another arc. Perfect. I'm going to draw another line, and this time I'm going to apply curvature. And in this case, it doesn't even let me, because the reality is that no matter what you're doing, you can't go from a standard arc to a line and make a curvature continuous. So in that particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another line, and I'm going to draw a spline. And the spline, and this is why I had to talk about splines a lot, is that the spline is going to allow me to go curvature between these different lines. Perfect. And that symbol looks a little crazy. It kind of looks like a person all laid out. And this is going to be very different than the one up next to it that for most people would be very similar, right? And I could even, just to really show you exactly what the differences are, I'm going to make these lines all parallel to each other, okay? We're going to say the distance here is, I guess, 25 millimeters. The distance here is going to be the same, 25 millimeters. And you can see here that this spline is a little bit different than this arc. The shape is a little bit different. And I could still manipulate it and get a weird result or a better result or a worse result. But either way, the spline and this line are now curvature continuous relative to each other, which is a higher level of smoothness. Now, if that was confusing to you, I'm not surprised. If I think about what I just said, it's confusing to me too. This is pretty complex stuff, and I'm trying my best to dumb it down so that anyone who watches this live or as a recording can at least gain some insight into what it means. And the gist of it is curvature is even more smooth than tangent. But for the most part, nearly everyone in the world who's not a professional product designer or product developer or product engineer would say that tangents are perfectly fine. That would be the way to go. Doing it this other method is a lot more work, and the bang for your buck is not necessarily worth it. So it's up to you on what you guys want to do. The very last thing I'd want to show, and then we're going to call it for the day because I've been talking for quite a while straight, is symmetry. And so just like before, I showed you creating a rectangle or something like a rectangle. And then, let's see, I'm going to put exactly like we had before. All right, so I had a shape like this, and then I drew a line, and I dragged this whole thing, and I said sketch, mirror, and I mirrored it across this line. Cool, and then I ended up with a mirrored version. Now, there are plenty of times where you already have two things, and you just want to make it so that they're symmetrical. So instead of making new geometry, you can instead apply this symmetry constraint. So here's a great example. Let's delete all that. We're going to draw a line, and this is going to be our symmetry line. And whenever I'm doing stuff like symmetry lines, by the way, I like to make it into what's called construction geometry. And construction geometry means that it's a line that you're just using to construct other things. So you take a line and you click on construct at this very top of our options, or you click on the line and you hit the letter X, and it'll convert from solid line to dotted or dotted to solid, whatever you prefer. Dotted is construction and solid is something you're actually using to build. So here I have my construction line, and I'm going to draw a circle over here, and I'm going to draw a circle over here. But let's say, you know, I'm going to draw some sort of bracket, and I want this circle and this one to always be symmetric. I want them to be like horizontal to each other, and I want them to be an even distance from the center. And I also want this rectangular thing to be the same. So I'm going to go and click on symmetry, and now I can choose line number 1, line number 2, and then the symmetry line. And it automatically snaps it so that it's symmetric. Now, when I drag this one, it's going to drag the other one as well. Cool. Now with lines, it's pretty obvious that that worked well. Let's go and do the same thing with a circle. So I pick this first circle, second circle, and symmetry line. And I did not do that correctly. Hold on, what am I doing wrong here? Try this again. I'm going to pick the first circle, not the middle. The second circle, not the middle. And I'm going to pick the center line, and it automatically snaps. They're horizontal to each other, and they are symmetric. I can still move them up and down, and I can move them out or in, but they will always now be symmetric across the center line. And now I can go and apply a dimension like center to center, 330 millimeters. And maybe from here to here, and now I have a number. But let's put all this together into something that's more practical. So right now I have this dimension for the width, and if I come in here and I change the width, like the distance between the circles to 500, I'm going to get some weird result. Right now the circles are way too close to the wall, right, of this rectangle. So I could dimension things differently, and to do that I want to use different sketch geometry. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this dimension here. I'm going to go and create under sketch point, and I'm going to pick this point here on that circle, and that should be all I need actually. And now I'm going to go and say dimension from this line to that point. And now, no matter what I do to this dimension for 330, I can make this 500 now, the wall, the distance from this end of the circle to here is always going to be 50. Now I do see a problem right away. This dot shifted down, and it wasn't supposed to, but that's easy to fix. I click on this point, click on the center of my circle, and I could say I want them to be horizontal, and now it'll remain horizontal. And I could also apply a dimension to the circle, maybe make that 50 millimeters, and everything starts to take shape. I can come in here and make it 100, even make it 125, or whatever it is I want to do. Do it one last time. Sketch a point, take that point in the center, make it vertical. Now I can go and put a dimension from that point to the end, maybe make that 50 as well. I'm going to give you a last tip of the day before we head off, is you could also apply equations to any of your dimensions. So if I come in here and I click on this 50, instead of typing in a number, I'm going to click on this other dimension, which happens to be named D29. The software knows that automatically. When I hit enter, you can see now it says fx, which stands for function, and the result is 50. And that's because when I change this one, it's going to automatically change the other, because the other one is now set to always copy this value, the value of D29. Excellent. So we covered a whole lot on sketching, and that was it. We didn't go into creating 3D models, how to create things for the laser cutter itself. All we covered was sketching. And the reason that I really wanted to cover sketching is because sketching, as a skill, is the fundamental skill that you need if you want to create amazing products in Fusion 360. Whether those products are 2D or 3D, doesn't matter. It all starts as a 2D sketch. And so getting your sketching skills up, that's the way to go. And I want to make sure that you spend the time to do that. We went over today each of the sketch tools pretty much one by one, which is really slow and painful, but I hope you gain a huge benefit from it. And then we went over here and went through every single constraint that is out there and what they mean and how to apply them. We also showed how to delete them and how to apply them practically, right? So instead of just showing you one constraint here and one constraint there, we actually showed you how to do it for a practical example. And I hope that you gain a lot from that and that you actually go out there and use it. I hope that if you already have your Glowforge, you love it. And if you don't have it, I hope you get it soon. I know I'm very, very lucky, and I finally received my Glowforge on the 22nd of November, and so I've had it for a few weeks now, and I absolutely love it. I also love Fusion 360, and so I am fortunate that I get to use Fusion to work on laser cutting and combine two things that I love together. I hope this was helpful. The recording is going to be posted online. If you're watching this live, you'll get to see it later recorded and watch this at any speed that you would like. And other than that, I just wish you have a great day. More webinars to follow. I haven't scheduled them yet, but I will shortly. Have a good one.